What's up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about Eric. Not that Eric. Let's do it.
48 hours since Edgar Anderson was last seen around 8 a.m.
When Edgar, a young boy, goes missing in 1980s Manhattan, his grief-stricken father, Vincent, a puppeteer on America's leading kids' TV show, finds solace through his friendship with Eric, the monster that his son created. This is definitely rated TV mature, so don't look at the puppets and the kids' show within the show and say, this is something I can watch with my kids, because it's about a kid who goes missing. Was he kidnapped? Did something even worse happen to him? Is it like, and that's the first thought that came to my head, Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, where it's all about a guy going after his kid, but he's trying to get some revenge along the way. And that was the comparison I made in my head, but this show's actually a lot more than that, especially when you watch the trailer and see that there are multiple stories that are intertwining here that all kind of culminate by the end of this 6-episode limited series. And so Vincent and his wife, they're both really struggling with the disappearance of his son, but Vincent decides to, I guess, kind of like Hugh Jackman's character did in Prisoners, take matters into his own hands, but goes about it in a different way. He goes into the underbelly of the city, kind of forced to reckon with the corruption. There's a subplot here that has to do with the homeless in New York City and how that's being handled by a lot of people involved. Some people kind of close to home, and so that made for a very interesting side thing happening, while the quest for the son obviously is the most important thing. But there are multiple kids that have gone missing around the same time. Why? What's covering it up? Are they all related? And then the other main storyline going on here with Detective Ledroit, where he's tasked to kind of uncover some of this corruption. Well, he's drawn into searching for Edgar, and at the same time, he's searching for another child whose mother is consistently showing up because she feels like nobody's really doing anything about this. Yes, my son is different when you look at how others are just kind of pushing this case to the side, but we're focusing on this other kid all of a sudden. And this is set in the 80s, obviously, but the backdrop here has to do with the 1980s AIDS epidemic, and that's a subplot that I didn't think would become super prominent as I was watching, but we're dealing with these very close-to-home relationships, I'm sure, for a lot of people watching this show. And Detective Ledroit, he's kind of coming to terms with his sexuality, but also having to handle a lot of people around him consistently riff on that and make fun of that. Some weird things happening at this nightclub place where people go there to express their own sexuality most of the time in secret, but some strange things in episode 1 kind of lead you to believe some people there should not be trusted, may not be trusted, and some scary things may be happening. Does it all come to fruition the way that you expect? Not necessarily. There were some nice twists and turns along the way, and thus, we have a lot of things going on in Eric. A lot more than just Vincent kind of clinging to this one drawing that his son has, and he thinks that that's the shining beacon, the path that could lead him back to his son, or his son back to him, because while he may have been kidnapped, he may be here or there, there's always a way for him to find his way back to me. At least that's the idea that he's sticking with. And so you get a lot of heartbreak along the way, especially with Gaby Hoffmann's Cassie. That's his mom. She is devastated beyond belief, as any mother would be, that her son is gone. But she doesn't handle it in a way to where she sits back and grieves. She's actually going out and trying to do something about it, right? You have the grief period at the beginning, but then it's like, I have to get my son back any way I possibly can, which is what multiple mothers are feeling in the show, where kids are and have been disappearing. You see numerous examples of that. But again, is it all connected? And is Vincent losing his mind? Benedict Cumberbatch plays a guy who doesn't have the best relationship with his son at the beginning of this show. And that's where I was a little thrown off. I'm like, I thought they were going to be all sweet to each other, lovey-dovey. I mean, he refers to him as kid, but then you start to see his backstory play out and how his relationship with his father may not have been the best. And so that's obviously what has led to him acting this way, right? But does that excuse the mistakes that he makes along the way? That's for us as viewers to decide. Obviously, he wants to make it right because he wants to find his son, but does it turn his life around? Does it allow him to treat other people with respect? And it's funny because he's the leading guy behind this puppet show. It's essentially like Sesame Street or something like that. So it's really sweet. It's made for the kids, but he's just this curmudgeonous, like, I hate everything. I hate life. but he's dealing with his own demons. And you see that play out when he's being followed by this big old imaginary friend who is also voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch. Again, all of these things are in the summary and or the trailer. These are not spoilers, but I love the way Cumberbatch plays him. And when he voiced Smaug in the Hobbit movies, he deepened his voice and made it sound all threatening and menacing. He kind of does that here with the big puppet character, but he doesn't do it in a way that's scary. It's more of like, oh, that's a creepy imaginary friend with a deep voice. But I loved that dynamic. At first, it was a little off-putting because they didn't really lead into it. It's just kind of like, hey, here are the things that he's dealing with. Boom, you got a big giant puppet. But the longer it went, the more you started to realize what he's actually dealing with psychologically, and it created for a very interesting spin to a show that could have just been him doing those things, but you get to see the demons that he's dealing with come to life, so that was interesting. But again, while this is the main story, there are episodes where this takes a back seat to our Detective Ledroit. Well, a lot of it spawned from McKinley Belcher's performance, who takes command of the episodes that he's a part of, and there's some things that happened in his life and are happening in his life that are leading him to feel very conflicted. But there's also some questions that he has about the peers around him, the way that they act in front of him, first of all, but also maybe they aren't doing everything they can. And that's an ongoing theme here. Maybe people aren't doing everything they can to kind of stop these things from happening, or at least treat others with respect. And so you have this theme set in the 80s, some things that were happening in real life, from the homelessness to the AIDS epidemic and all of those things culminating, but tying in with our plot. And I think that's simultaneously my biggest issue with Eric, along with what maybe made it the most interesting is there's a lot going on, so it has a lot to juggle and a lot to balance. And I don't know, honestly, if 6 episodes was enough to bring all of these story threads to a close and put a cap on each individual story, because I did feel some things missing. Oh, boo-hoo! Especially Dan Fogler's character in Lenny, that gets some time to shine, but there were so many questions I had about his story, and why didn't we get more about that? Again, 6 episodes, not a lot of time to shoehorn him in, so I understand why they did it, but that felt very shortchanged for me, and there were a few ideas here that felt shortchanged. Some things I felt like they could have explored, without giving spoilers, a lot more, and giving us a more satisfying culmination at the end, because it does culminate at the end. All of these stories come together, and in a way, come together beautifully. It does have that Lord of the Rings, okay, you have multiple endings in this final episode. We're ending it. No, we're going back to it. We're ending it again. So I'm like, all right, but I get it, because there's a lot of story threads that they had to bring to a close. And so it felt overstuffed in a way, a little bit crammed, but all of the ideas that they were going for, I really respect, because they were all compelling stories. It's just, do you get those satisfying culminations and conclusions? I don't know. Now, for some of the storylines, you absolutely do. And I will admit, the way that this ultimately came to a close, I was moved. It kind of swept me away a little bit. I was very emotionally connected with that final episode. But there were some things about certain characters that I felt they left out. And so ultimately, I don't know if I saw all the growth in certain characters that they tried to give me. And I'm like, man, it's hard to root for some of these characters. But the way that they handle it was really solid. Now, all of this being said, there's some real emotion that's being showcased in this show. First of all, just the idea of a child being kidnapped or whatever happens, right? It instills that initial fear, especially a fear that I would have since I'm a dad now. So I'm watching this and I'm like, I can immediately resonate with these characters, even though some of them are kind of unlikable, not the best people, doesn't matter. They're all uniting for the same thing. But then it's all of these other things happening, right? A guy in Detective Ledroit who is going through his own very personal things happening, and people that are constantly harassing him, even if they don't know that they are, right? But then he's trying his best to do what is right, and you see that, you feel that, the moral compass and code that he works by. It's actually beautiful, and the performances, the way that Hoffmann and Cumberbatch are working off of each other, just powerhouse performances from start to finish. They're amazing. Their chemistry, or lack thereof at times, was awesome.
It was perfect.
Before I give you my score, are you watching Eric on Netflix this weekend? Would you like me to talk about the ending? Because there are a lot of things that happen in that final final episode. If you do, drop that like down below and let me know in the comments, but also your thoughts as a whole. Eric is a creative and emotionally effective series that tries to cram quite a bit into 6 episodes. The ideas, while not all completely developed, create an urgency and engrossing atmosphere that will have viewers invested until the end. Cumberbatch, Hoffmann, and Belcher are fantastic in their roles, so some great performances here. Hey, if you all want to see me talk more about these Netflix projects, shows, movies, be sure to follow our podcast, Movie Mode. We just had episode 1 last week. Episode 2 is dropping this weekend. I'm so excited to be launching something like this, so follow us on all podcasting platforms and our YouTube channel. Thanks so much for doing that. You all made episode 1 a hit, and I couldn't appreciate it more. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with yet another review this weekend in a violent nature coming soon.